Alright, hello everybody and welcome back to the Superlite coupe build. In this video we are going to fab up the fuel tank area closeout panels. So let's take a look at what we are up to. Let's see, I took the fiberglass tub out of the car to expose the fuel tank area. And this is the way the chassis is delivered from the factory. So, you have the chassis pan, but it only covers about half the fuel tank area. And then you have this open area, underneath the 2x6 chassis rail. In prior versions of the chassis, that bottom section was closed out. Now it's left open, and the rear section is always left open. So, I guess if you're building a race car and you have a fuel cell, it's less weight to add these closeout panels. But like I've said, I'm building a street car, so I want to close out these panels. That'll just, continue to reduce noise and perhaps be a bit safer, just adding an extra layer between the engine and the road and the fuel tank. Okay, so we're going to do some mocking up with some poster board, and we'll translate those mock-ups to aluminum, and we'll attach them to the chassis. Here we go. Well, this is at least the first minor step in the process here, and just mocking things up. So I want to mock up the rear closeout panel. I decided to attach it from the inside of the fuel tank area. Some people do it on the opposite side, but I wanted to have as much room behind that panel to run this cooling tube, which has to sort of peek behind the dry sump. It's a little hard to see, it's a little dark and a bunch of stuff in the way. But anyway, one thing I'm planning on doing is in this area here, making an access panel. So I want to be able to get to the bolts or the nuts that are going to hold the dry sump bracket to the frame. Just in case it loosens up, I want to be able to get my fingers back there and tighten it up with a wrench or what have you. But I'll need an access panel there. And then in this area, I need a cutout for the filler on the fuel tank, the filler neck. So I may make that out of one panel or two panels. I've got to give that a little thought. But in the meantime, I do have the aluminum for the bottom closeout panel. But before I start cutting that up and hacking it up, I'm also going to make a poster board version of that, just so I know where the cuts are going to be and I can visualize it and make sure I like the design. Okay, so the next step, I'll do the bottom out of poster board, and then we'll work on the closeout panels. Okay, well, I'm done mocking up these panels. Let's see, I just had to do a couple things. The rear panel, I had to cut a hole for the fuel inlet, and then there's a tube that runs through the fuel tank for the trans cables. And some people, if they're using a manual parking brake, they'll run the parking brake cable through there. Let's see, the bottom, you can see I notched out where those welds are, so that'll lay flat, and we'll weld that up. We'll just take a peek at the fuel tank so you can see. You can see where the cables go in, and they sort of go in on an angle. And then you have the fuel inlet. I just basically transposed some of the measurements from the tank to the back panel, and I got that right. The first one, you could see this one looks a little egg-shaped, so I didn't get the location exactly perfect, but I'll redo that on the board before I transfer it over to the metal. Okay, so I'm going to put the tank in, and then the next step really is to mock up the brackets that'll secure the fuel tank. Okay, well, I think I'm done mocking everything up, and I just sort of like to do this because I can visualize it all before I start ordering the rest of the aluminum parts and cutting those pieces up. So I noticed a couple things here. So I came up with the size of the L brackets. They're going to be 2.5 inches tall, 2.5 inches deep. Underneath the L brackets, I'll have 1/4 inch neoprene rubber. And then I think I'm going to just shorten this sheet down by 1/2 inch, because we're going to wind up putting the holes to attach the plate sort of midway through the bracket here and across, and that's about 1 inch from the bottom of this 2x6. So the way it's going to work is we'll have rubber here, rubber underneath these L brackets, and then if we move around the other side, we have to keep the tank from shifting over, and I think I'll use 3, maybe I'll use 2 L brackets there, and I may trim those down. I don't think they need to be so deep. Okay, so I'm going to order the rest of the aluminum, and then I'll fabricate it up, and then we'll take a look at it. Okay, well, here's a little work in process. So I'm getting ready to cut the bottom panel, and what I did notice is I sort of overcut the fiberboard a little bit. Not a big deal. I mean, I could always adjust it when I go to cut it, which is what I'm going to do. So I decided to actually use some of the modeling clay I have laying around from the prior video, and I'm just sort of placing that modeling clay and molding it to the shapes of the welds. So then I'll mark up the bottom panel, and then I'll cut it much more precisely, and I think it'll come out okay. All right, so we'll cut that panel up, and then we'll take a look at it. Okay, well, a few hours later, we got that panel all trimmed out. You can see the gaps, are almost non-existent, so it lays nice and flat. It was just a lot of time. If I went for uniformity of the cutouts, I'd have bigger gaps, but I could have probably spent maybe an hour cutting this out instead of 3 to 4 hours. I just don't work fast. But anyway, here's the rear panel. I'm going to cut those 2 bottom pieces out, and then I'll cut out the 2 holes for the back of the fuel tank. All right, well, we're making a lot of progress here. I put the mocked up cardboard piece in one more time, and I want to double check those holes relative to the tank, because we cut the bottom 2 slots out of this panel and it fits great. I just want to make sure that when I drill the holes for the fuel filler and also the access hole, that they line up with the fuel tank correctly. Okay, well, I'm finished cutting the back piece out, and it's a little dark here, but look at that. That lines up just beautifully. I do have to make some adjustment. I had to lift the panel up a little bit to get the fuel tank in the area, so I'll probably have to elongate that hole, for the fuel tank inlet, but other than that, it came out good. So really the next step is really to attach this panel with screws. Once I attach that panel, then I have some closeout angles that I have to add, and I have to add here, because you can see there's a gap. So there'll be sort of a closeout panel, right along the side there. So I'll do that after I attach the large panel to the back of the chassis. Okay, well here's a little work in process. Let's see, a few comments. I mean, certainly getting there. I'm using the Clecco fasteners. I won't go into a tutorial on Cleccos. I've never worked with them before, but they're really pretty neat. So I got a pack of like 25 with the pliers on eBay, and it just makes mounting sheet metal really easy and helps mount the sheet metal flat. Basically, you see a bunch of Kleccos in there. I don't have a Clecco on each hole. Let's see. You'll see some gaps on the top of the closeout panel. I'm basically going to put a fuel tank mount here, the oil tank mount through here and through the bottom, and then those top two spaces, those will be the other fuel tank mounts. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap these holes. We'll screw it on, and then we have those closeout angle brackets which close out the side gaps. I'm going to do those, and then I think we'll call it a wrap. Okay, well, for the sake of completeness, I'll show the back angles that sort of close out, you know, that 1/8 inch plus gap that I have on the side of the panels. At this point, I'll drill the holes out, I'll tap them, and then I'll focus on the brackets for the fuel tank. Okay, well, this will be the last segment of this video. As you can see, I've got that rear closeout panel all attached. I tapped all the holes, and you know, I think it came out pretty good. You know, you can see the panel lays against the rear frame rail totally flat, which is really what you want. So we get no air leaks. You can see the side gaps are now closed up, which is nice. We'll take a peek behind, and there's the closeout angle. And I decided to attach the rear panel to the closeout angle from the back. That way I don't have the screw holes sort of protruding, because that's really where the fuel tank is going to be, even though we'll have you know, some rubber to create some distance there. Anyway, speaking of rubber, I think in the beginning I mentioned I was going to use neoprene rubber, but I've changed my mind and I'm going to use silicone rubber. Silicone and the adhesive that's applied to it is rated at over 300 degrees, and you know, right behind this panel I'm going to have the dry sump, and that oil is well over 200 degrees on the dry sump. So I just want to play it safe and get a high temperature rubber. Okay, in a future video we're going to get the fuel tank welded up. We'll fabricate the actual fuel tank brackets, and then we'll finish this area of the car, and then we'll move to really the last section, which is the rear of the car. Okay, so thanks for watching. It's really appreciated. Take care.